to welcome back our guest teacher for today. This is a face you're getting to know well, which I'm very excited about, but I want to reintroduce everyone to my good friend and colleague, Betsalel Steinhart, coming to us live from Israel. I guess to you, Betsalel, we'll say Erev Tov. Nice to see you. And I know that Betsalel has already taught one of these classes, and we were becoming more and more familiar with him as a brilliant educator. But I just want to share real quickly his bio, because whenever someone has as impressive as a bio as Betsalel does, I think it's important to hear. And as we try to get to know him a bit better. Betsalel was born in London, England, and made Aliyah as a teen with his family. After his army service, he earned a BA in psychology and Jewish philosophy from Bar Ilan University, and is currently finishing his master's in Jewish history and Jewish education at the Schechter Institute for Jewish Studies in Jerusalem. Betsalel has been a licensed tour guide in Israel since 1999, and is privileged to have guided groups from all over the world, and over the years taught at a number of Israeli institutions, including being heavily involved in the education of diaspora Jews. He is a good friend to TBS, having guided numerous TBS trips to Israel, including our annual 10th grade confirmation trip, and most recently, Rabbi Peltz's 2019 family trip to Israel. And also, in case that's not enough, Betsalel joined the Ramah Israel staff in 2000 as a guide and an educator, and is now the director of the short-term group department for the Ramah Israel Institute. Betsalel lives in Beit Shemesh with his wife and 5 sons. He's got his hands full. And we're really honored to welcome back Betsalel. Betsalel is going to be teaching today on Lag BaOmer and giving us a bit of some information and touring up in the northern part of Israel. So we're very excited to learn with you today, Betsalel. The floor is yours, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end where Betsalel can take some questions as well. All you, Betsalel.
Toda Rabbi, much appreciated. I'll already say that, as the rabbi said, I have 5 sons, which means it's now bedtime, which means I definitely prefer to be here than taking care of them. I'm sorry, my beautiful wife, but I've got work to do, so here I am. And I mean, they are lovely people. You never love your kids more than when they are fast asleep. Have you ever thought about that? When they're just beautiful and sleeping peacefully, and that'll hopefully happen soon. By the time I finish this, that's what I'd like to happen. And yeah, absolutely, I consider myself a friend of your community. You are one of my go-to places. I've got to come visit the rabbis and encounter Cohen and all of the people who are such incredible over the years, who've given me so much, and who I've enjoyed their company, and it's just a pleasure coming on and being with you. And I know some of you were on last week with Ilan and the week before with me as well. And hopefully we can explore, have fun, enjoy ourselves, try and understand my English accents as well. I know that's not necessarily the easiest thing. If I talk too fast or say something that isn't clear, by all means ask. And let's be honest here, this is all about you guys. So if you have anything that isn't clear or you want to ask, by all means interrupt. Although if I'm playing some sort of video clip, I may just wait till the end of that so it doesn't mess up the whole technological balagan, as they say. Any questions so far? I haven't said anything yet, but any questions so far or things you want to ask yet? Fantastic. Let's go straight into it. And let us try. I won't be able to read the chat, by the way, while I'm sharing my screen most of the time. So if you have anything you want to just unmute and ask, or Rabbi, you'll read out the chat. Besedel Metsuyan. Let's go straight into it and see if this actually does work, because you never know. This should be a view of the northern part of Israel. Is that happening? Somebody unmute and say yes, and then we can continue.
Yes.
Fantastic. North of Israel. And I imagine most of you have been to Israel at one point. And before we get into that, let's introduce you and me and what we're doing. This is about Lag BaOmer in the north of Israel. These two, which I'm going to connect them, these two strange aspects of our religion, both this weird festival and a portion of the country that doesn't really have a connection that kind of does. And we're going to try and pull it all together and see what we can learn and where we can go. That's the topic right now. But before you go into it, before anything else, you've got to acknowledge the fact that this beautiful land, which you can see on your screen, which is in the right-hand corner, and if you zoom in, is now in the kind of center, with so many how can I put this nicely, issues that we are always having in our wonderful country. If it is politics, which I'm sure you're well aware, it just never ends. If it's corruption, if it's doing things right to other people or not doing things to other people, it always seems to be problematic. And yet, there's still so much to be proud of if you look at our land. What we've accomplished over the last, 73 and a little bit years is unreal. And so it does behoove me to wish my favorite entity, aside from my family, a happy 73rd birthday, which happened last week. You don't turn 73 every day, and you don't look a day older than 72. Let's be really honest here. So happy 73rd birthday, Israel. This is the time to be in Israel. Like Lag BaOmer is just a small cog in this vast entity, which is post-Passover madness in this country. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because I really have a lot I want to do about Lag BaOmer. I can't resist sharing just a couple of things about this time period, which we are whizzing through, and albeit we're still kind of, in pandemic mode, but we are kind of not. I'm not sure if you're reading about it, but Israel Sunday a few days ago just stopped the law that you have to wear a mask in public. You only inside you have to. And I walked outside for the first time without my mask for a year. I literally felt like I was walking out without my pants on. I felt totally naked, like, oh, I want to cover my face. Who's looking at me kind of thing? Because it was very weird. And you get used to it, I guess. But it's a crazy time anyway, and it's even more crazy now with the pandemic. Here's just one way of describing what Israel goes through post-Pesach, and it's this little guy over here. Some of you may have seen this video. I think I've shared it a few times, but I love it so much because this is the Jerusalem Biblical Zoo on Pesach. And these are the chimps who really love matzah. And you can tell what they're eating. They're not just eating it, they're downing it. This guy at the back, he's just doing the perfect relaxation. On Passover, you're supposed to lean back and then be at the center with all this leaning stuff. He's doing that. He's doing that completely. And the other one's just like down in it. I think it's matzah with flies on it, I think is his favorite. What is this about? This is just the craziness that is Israel post-Passover. This, by the way, is me when I'm holding my matzah. That's my expression. I don't know about you guys, but I'm like, do I really need to eat any more of this? Can we just move on with our regular meals? But this is really Passover. And it doesn't end there. And I think some of you saw this in the last one I shared. I'm just sharing it again because it's so powerful. This is really what happens after Passover, is you go immediately, like a roller coaster, like down from the heights of Passover through Holocaust Memorial Day over there, down through the Memorial Day for the soldiers, which is last week, and up into Independence Day. And then it continues this roller coaster, up, down, up, down. It doesn't seem to end. And there's a lot of symbolism behind this. But I will say, for me, the most beautiful way of expressing this crazy week is, well, it's two or threefold. The first way, before we get to Lag BaOmer, is this very short video of what happened in 2003 above the skies of Auschwitz-Birkenau. Check this video out and hear what the pilots in these jets are saying as they fly over Auschwitz-Birkenau.
מצביעים לגבורתם ומבטיחים להיות מגן לעם היהודי ולארצו ישראל.
That iconic aspect of what it was like to fly over Auschwitz is a bit of a bridge for me as well, from my tour with you in Poland over to my tour of the northern Israel, because that symbolizes so much of what we've undergone over the last 60 years of the rebirth of life here, and the ability to now not only suffer but defend ourselves. But I want to go over from that to the importance of the week following that, as we reach Lag BaOmer, because all of them are connected, in my opinion. And the week of Yom HaAtzmaut, Yom HaZikaron, Independence Day, Memorial Day, following that very powerful day of Yom HaShoah, of Holocaust Memorial Day, is known in Israel now as the Aseret Yemei Todah, the 10 days of gratitude by many portions of the population. Because, I mean, not dissimilar to your Thanksgiving. The idea is that these are days when we look at the Shoah, where we look at those who gave their life in defense of the country, and we look at the fact they have a country, and we say, I need to say thank you for what we've got. And you will see this is in my street, by the way. I'm thankful for, in Hebrew, Arabic, and in English, what am I thankful for? 10 different opportunities over 10 days of this incredible moving time. But all this really is background. Because what I want to do, I want to go into these days and get to Lag BaOmer. Because here's a little graphic I discovered many, many years ago when I first started teaching this. You have the following things going on in this time period, just to go through them very briefly. You have Pesach, which we all know. You have Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day, which I just spoke about. You have Rosh Chodesh Iyar, the first day of the month of Iyar. You have Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day. You have right next to that Yom Ha'atzmaut, which we had last week, of course, Independence Day. You have Lag BaOmer that we're going to get to today. That's our major topic. Put that in the back of your mind. You have next week Yom Yerushalayim, celebrating the reunification of Jerusalem in the 1967 war. You have then Rosh Chodesh Shvat, which is the next month. And finally, you have the biblical holiday of Shavuot. So you have so much going on in the 7 weeks of the Omer, between Pesach and Shavuot, where we count 49 days of the Omer. And one day when I was teaching this, I noticed that the following graphic really hits home. And you'll see it appearing on your screen, and you'll say at some point, oh, because, of course, there's no more Jewish symbol than that. And for me, it's not just, oh, cool, 9 different things going on, 7 in between Pesach and Shavuot. It's a lot more than that, because Yom Ha'atzmaut stands in the center by itself as that incredibly important day, and the other pairs are kind of connected. Now is not the time to get into all of the connections, but the connection between Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, and Lag BaOmer is there, and we're going to talk about that. Lag BaOmer being the time somebody very, very famous died, and many, many others died in another separate incident that we're going to maybe get to. But this is not just a pretty graphic, it also means something. So much is going on, and we're going to focus now specifically on Lag BaOmer. So after Passover goes out, after Yom Ha'atzmaut finishes, and I love putting this on the screen, it's if you grill it, it is no dream, instead of if you will it, it is no dream. And that was above my house. I just want to share 2 things that happened over the course of this week, if I can, that I find phenomenal. The President of Israel, who, thank God, he's such a wonderful man, Reuven Rivlin, has been reading stories to kids on Facebook every night. Why? Because he wants to, because he feels this is a good way to connect to the kids. And this is just like a screenshot I took. I was like, oh, this is so cool. I got to share this in my next presentation. Or this video that was released by Natan Sharansky. It talks about how he got through quarantine and isolation in the 80s in Russia. And they'll help give tips for us to get through quarantine if we happen to go into quarantine. Such Israeli things. But enough about that. We're into Lag BaOmer. And I don't know how much you know about this very strange festival, because it is a very strange festival. It, first of all, does not appear anywhere in the Tanakh, in the Bible, nothing. There's no words of it. The first time it's even mentioned in modern times is only about 800-900 years ago. But clearly it begins to have some sort of aspect of importance with the death of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. We'll talk about him in a second. Either way, it certainly isn't something you'll see in the Torah. And it's a very, very strange festival. Why? What are we doing? There's a lot of very weird customs, some of which you can see on your screen, that kind of connect. And it's kind of got a life of its own. And the fact that we're talking about this when we talk about the north of Israel is also important, because the two are very much connected. And they also have this difference, because the north is also not really that central part of Judaism. The central part is Israel, and we're going to learn about that. So it's Jerusalem is the center, not the northern part. So what is this Lag BaOmer festival? Well, to really understand it, you have to go all the way back in history. And we're going to go back all the way to when the 12 tribes entered the land of Israel over 3,000 years ago under the leadership of Joshua after Moses dies. And I'm going to get to why in a second. but they give out the tribes. Every tribe takes its portion. You can see that on the left. And the major centers, which would end up being Jerusalem and Hebron, go to Judah and Benjamin and the other tribes. And the ones up north, you can see on your right there, are kind of, they take the area that isn't necessarily important, but it's very, very good farming land. And that is going to be critical because you want to have the good farming land. You want to be able to earn a buck, as they say. And this is therefore the beginning of where the north kind of takes importance, but it's always, in the entire time of the temples, it always takes a back seat to Jerusalem because that's where you want to go. You want to go to Jerusalem. This is our history in 2 very brief slides. If after we settle in the land, Solomon will build the first temple, it will be destroyed. The second temple will be built. Alexander the Great, the Hanukkah story, there it is over there on the right. And finally, the Roman era of Herod the Great rebuilding the temple. The north does not feature. There's barely anything there. The people live there for sure. They're doing farming there, but there's nothing important about it. As well as that, Lag BaOmer does not exist at this point. So for a good 2,000 years of Jewish history, both of our topics, the north of Israel and Lag BaOmer, do not exist. So we can gently push that aside and look at more modern history. I kind of find it ironic to say modern history, and then we're talking about 2,000 years ago, but such is Judaism. So let's move forward to the second half of Judaism, and we're talking about the post-temple era. After the Romans destroyed the second temple in year 70, suddenly both these 2 aspects, Lag BaOmer and the north of Israel, come to life and come to light. And this is what we're going to look at right now. And it's not just once, by the way, just to talk about the north for a second, that it gains importance. There's 2 other times. Once at the beginning of the Ottoman Empire, we're going to talk about that right now. And once more modern times, at the end of the British Mandate, even slightly before that. In fact, to be really honest, if you're looking at the north of Israel, and this is just a standard Google Earth picture of the north of Israel, you could ignore what's below it. But there are, and here's something that I find to be very important for us to take in if we're going to learn anything. There were 3 times that Judaism moved its bags north from the center, which is always going to be Jerusalem. Each time has a reason. Each time was following or in the midst of some sort of tragedy. And each time, well, it lasts, but doesn't last the test of time. Let's look at these 3. Maybe you know them, maybe you don't. The first one is the necessity of the post-temple Bar Kokhba revolt. When the temple is destroyed, and about 70 years later, in year 132 CE, somewhere in the region of 1900 years ago, Bar Kokhba revolt takes place. Judaism is crushed by the Romans, and we were not allowed to be near Jerusalem. We had no choice. The necessity was that we had to flee up north. And indeed, as we'll see, we did that. We went up north and we were not allowed near the holiest sites. Gradually, Christianity will come and take over, and then it'll move its bags, and Judaism will be allowed to kind of resettle where it wants. But that is the beginning of our move up north. There'll be many, many synagogues in the Byzantine times established there because it is a center. Hundreds of years will pass before the next time it gains importance. And this is the spirituality move. In 1492, the Jews of Spain are expelled, as I'm sure you know. Perhaps the biggest upheaval in Jewish history, which happens in one fell stroke. The entire glory of Sephardic Judaism is all at once forced out and forced to go everywhere. And many will go all over, and some will come to Tzfat, looking for that inspiration, that spirituality. And that is the second time the north of Israel will gain importance. The third time is a couple of centuries after that, and it's a practicality issue. Zionism. The new elements of modern Zionism, waves of Aliyah coming to this land, and the idea here is that we're looking for a place to settle. Jerusalem isn't necessarily a place we can go. Maybe it's not even practically a place we want to go because we want to farm the land. Remember, biblical times, they also wanted to farm the land, and the north has much, much better land for farming. It's also behind that tragedy of the Shoah. We recognize here there's 3 tragedies, perhaps the 3 biggest tragedies of Jewish history. The temple being destroyed, the expulsion from Spain after the Inquisition, of course, and the Shoah, arguably 3 of the biggest. And each of these, the north takes its place instead of Jerusalem, because Jerusalem cannot or is not something that's wanted. So that's the background of the north of Israel. We haven't yet really gotten to Lag BaOmer yet. But the north of Israel is going to be where we're going to look at it for many reasons that we'll see in a second. I think I'll pause for a second and see if there's any questions on what I've said so far. I've gone through quite a bit. Are there any questions you'd like to ask or read from the chat? Okay, if there's nothing, we'll move on. Anything, feel free to stop me. Those three tragedies, I want to look at them slightly and see how Lag BaOmer melds itself into that. The first is the destruction of the temple, and after that, Bar Kokhba revolt. Drawings of what the temple was destroyed, the burning, the Romans, you can see that. But importantly for us, Jerusalem, especially after Bar Kokhba, is emptied of its Jews. And this, you'll see on the right, is where the Sanhedrin, the great court, will move in stages to Yavne and then up north, because they couldn't go near Jerusalem. It will go from Usha, Shvar'am, Bet Sha'arim, Tziporim, Tiberias. This is where the Talmud will be written, the Jerusalem Talmud, of course. This is where Jerusalem will become, the north of Israel will become the center. One of the major aspects of this becoming the center is the movements of these great rabbis, foremost of whom are two. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, you probably have heard of, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which you may have heard of. In order to really understand these rabbis and why Lag BaOmer is celebrated because of what went on, we kind of have to look at where they went. And they all settled in these villages. I've just zoomed in on what was on the left there, you can see on the right. And they found dozens, as you can see, of synagogues and learning houses and places that they were, including this one there called Meron, Mount Meron. This is where our story starts getting important for Lag BaOmer. Here we have the north of Israel. And you can see, I'm going to now zoom in. I want you to look at there. There's Sfat, Safed, there's the Sea of the Galilee. We're not going to see those as we zoom in. Excuse me, wrong way. Let's zoom in now. You can see there, you have three spots I'd like you to notice. There, I keep going the wrong way. Excuse me, I will not do that again. There is Mount Meron. And below it, a little tiny village called Meron. We will be talking about why these are so important. But notice it's a hill bang in the middle of the country. This is a place where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai will go to and will eventually be buried. I'll get to him in a second. Peki'in is another place I'd like you to look at. That is a place where there is a very, very famous cave. We're going to look at that in a second as well. And finally, Tzfat, or Safed, which is the place that people will move to as the expulsion takes place in order to look for that spirituality. But let's take a look at that, shall we? Because this is the man of the moment when it comes to Lag BaOmer. Now, we don't know what this person looked like. It's an artist's rendition. But I want you to notice on the left, he's sitting in some sort of cave. And on the right, there's some sort of strange Hebrew words which kind of say, okay, why am I reading this? And first of all, a lot of the facets of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is connected to mysticism. There is no greater mystic. And if you've ever been to Tzfat, I'm sure some of you have, you know that mysticism and Tzfat go hand in hand. And one of the reasons why that is the case is because of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And if you look at those letters in blue, the top letters, if you shuffle them around, will form the word Shimon. And the bottom letters, if you shuffle them around, the ones in blue will form the words Yochai, Shimon Bar Yochai. In English, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai the Rashbi. Some of you may have heard of this man, but there is no greater mystic than this 2nd century rabbi who was the former student of the well-known Rabbi Akiva. Now, perhaps it's not the time to get into a long discussion on him and the legends that surround this man, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, but suffice it to say that to him is attributed one of the most important books in Judaism, the mystical book of the Zohar, and his life is a study in Jewish-Roman relations and Jewish esoteric mystical relations as well. To give it a brief background, he is the one who is ordained by Rabbi Akiva, who was his rabbi until Rabbi Akiva was killed after Bar Kokhba revolt. He moves up north after Bar Kokhba revolt, and he spends his life, well, there's a lovely legend of that cave on the left where the Romans were looking for him and his son because they were doing the crime of teaching Torah. You were not allowed to teach Torah. So him and his son go into this cave and they stay in there for 13 years. And then the legends talk about when they came out, their laser-like eyes were destroying things because they could not comprehend that people would do anything but learn and be close to God. How could somebody just farm the fields? And then they came in for another year and went out, and then they understand that some people are not on that level, but maybe they are, but not everybody is. And he doesn't stay in the cave because the decree has been rescinded on what he's allowed to do. He moves around, he will go to Mount Meron, and that is where he will die. But critically, on the day of his death, surrounded by his students, he will reveal all the deepest secrets of the Zohar in a day which is known as the Shining, the Hilula, and he will die on this day. What day? Lag BaOmer, according to the legend. And now we finally see something going on with this day that has been lost, hasn't really made an appearance in our presentation. The Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and Lag BaOmer, the day he reveals all of these secrets to his students and allow them to continue his work. Very strange story. And I haven't given you the half of it because the legends there are like, yeah, really? And I always say when you teach things like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai or the rabbis of Tzfat or anything mystical, it's easy just to dismiss it and say, yeah, whatever, mystical stories, thank you. I'm a realist. But I'll say this to you as well. If you believe all of the stories you hear about these mystics and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, then you're a fool. If you believe none of them, you're a bigger fool. So decide what you believe and what you don't, because it's a very intricate, strange, and wonderful world there that most of us don't have an inkling of. But that's mysticism. This is where he spends those 13 years. It's a little cave in Pekin. They take groups there all the time. Little teeny cave, but zoom in a little bit. You can see there, little cave where, according to the legend, that's where he spends that 13 years. And if you look at the sign there, you're going to see, well, I actually zoomed in on it because, yes, it does say this is a holy place, not a holy place. Every time I go there, I'm like, somebody at some point is going to correct this. And I'm kind of going to be sad because I like that naivety in someone who ever wrote that sign. Either way, you're going to go back here. This holy place is revered because this is where he becomes that legendary figure. He doesn't die here. He lives here for 13 years. But moving on for a second, I want to put him behind us. We're going to get back to him. But if you look for a second at the next stage, we spoke about post-temple, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai going to the cave, dying in Meron. Tzfat will be the next time that Judaism will migrate toward the north. And you can see those lines there going from Tzfat all over Europe, indeed to pretty much everywhere. But one of those lines there leads to Israel and will lead to Tzfat up there because that's where they were going. And that was the second, as I said, the spiritual exodus in seeking out that new spiritual way of life, that way to, in some ways, even compensate for the lack of what they had in Spain in the glory of the Sephardic Judaism. What I want to do, therefore, is I want to take you on a short flight. I love this video, over Tzfat. And I'm going to guide you through it as we fly over it. This is the best we can do to actually walking in the alleyways of Tzfat. I'm going to turn the music off so I can speak. And here you will see, this is Tzfat, the old city down below. The Crusader castle that we're flying over on the top, it was the highest point in the area. It was a place the Crusaders wanted to rule. And as this beautiful drone pans around, you can see below the new city, the old city, the graveyard we're going to look at in a second, and most importantly, the Mount of Meron there in the distance. That's it. We're going to look at that in a second because Tzfat and Mount Meron are intricately connected in the kind of mysticism and the reason Tzfat becomes so holy. And down below you can see the different yeshivas, you can see the centers of learning, as well as all the places that people are living in the Jewish quarter of the city of Tzfat. This is a place to come and tour. This is a place to walk among the tiny alleyways and see that holiness, that beauty of Tzfat. But Tzfat wasn't always a Jewish city. In that third time of Jews coming towards the north, they didn't always find friends there. And if you look down below, you can see the graveyard and Mount Meron. And look at this. This is where you can rise up above. from the very depths of the city. Isn't it beautiful? And anyone who's been to Tzfat will know that the air there literally breathes spirituality. It is beautiful. It is a place that people looking for spirituality were drawn towards. And after so much destruction in Spain, it was clear they needed somewhere which you could revitalize. We've now jumped across to the other side of the mountain. When we look at that building in a few minutes, to Mount Meron. We're now right below one of the peaks of Mount Meron, the highest peaks outside of the Golan Heights in Israel, 4,000 meters above sea level. And that, my friends, below is the tomb of the Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It is the place for mystics to come, pour out their hearts, wait for the miracle, wait for their prayers to be answered. It is the place to go. And it is for many reasons. In this sleepy little tiny town called Meron, that is their main draw. There's nothing else there aside from the grave of the Rashbi, because that's what people come and look for. As we're going to learn about in a second, Lag BaOmer and the Rashbi are intricately connected. But you can also take a look at this mountain and see something else. This is Mount Meron. You can see it from the side in the beautiful forest, Nachal Amud Valley going below it. But you can see if you look really carefully, and just highlight it, looks like there's antennas and bumps and something on top. Can you see that? And then there's the other peak, there's a double peak there, which is right above. That's the grave I showed you before of the Rashbi. And you have these two peaks of the double peak of the mountain, where the left side is very much the religious side, where mystics will come and they'll go to the top and look down on the grave of the Rashbi, and they will pray and they will sing, and on Lag BaOmer we're going to see what they do. It's incredible to see. And on the right-hand side, you have an army base. That's what it is. It's an army base which you can't get into. It's there for very obvious reasons. It's very high up. And so you can see into everywhere. You want to have an army base. It's an intelligence base. And I always think, and I always like saying this, it strikes me as each one of the two, the mystics, the religious, the flying with the garb and the mysticism, and the army soldiers with their guns, each one thinks they're protecting the other, if you think about it. Each one thinks that what they're doing is protecting the other ones. The religious people, they're learning, protecting the soldiers, and the soldiers with their guns are protecting the religious, and perhaps in a place like Tzfat, they both are protecting each other. Perhaps we do need both. This is a little thought that always comes in my mind when I look at Mount Meron. But going into what happens after that, we'll get back to what goes on in Lag BaOmer today in a second, because that's also important. The third wave of people coming up north, just to briefly touch on that, because I did promise that, is in modern times, the kibbutznikim dancing the hara in the circle, that classic picture. Here we have the reason they go up north is because that's where the good farming land is. And indeed, it's all those little dots on your map there are all places that they put kibbutzim, that they settled in those years of 31 to 46, during and after the Shoah. It even is given a name. It's called the N of settlement. And you can tell why, because that's a wonderful land, and it is in the form of an N. That's where they all settled. Up the coast, down the Jezreel Valley, and up to the north, into the Galilee Peak, obviously including Tzfat and Meron Mountains. But that's where they settle. And again, that's really for practical purposes, because they're all kibbutznikim. They're all on a farm. Any questions up till now on things I've said? I do want to make sure I take a break every now and then to answer if there's anything. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Let's move on then.
Yes.
Oh, other questions?
No, I was saying I don't see any hands.
Okay, let's move on. I want to go into modern times and Tzfat and Lag BaOmer today, right now, what goes on in Israel. And I want to be able to show you a few sides of it. First, this beautiful video produced by Israel 21C, which talks about, well, it doesn't talk at all. It just shows you in a wonderful way of what Tzfat is if you've never been there. I happen to love the music here as well. I spent 4 months of my life in Tzfat working for an organization there. And it's a wonderful place to go. It really is. There are such strange and beautiful and different people there. and they just seem to live a different kind of life. You're looking at the alleyways, the books, the synagogues that some of you have been to. And as you look at it, I'll tell you one story of my own. I'll never forget the day I left Sfat, with all its integral mysticism and all its strange people. I was walking out, and I was going to the synagogue for the last morning, and I passed the same floor cleaner, guy sweeping the streets who'd been doing that every day. And I said hello to me, he said hello to me, and I asked him who he was, sweeping these alleyways as you look at the art in the background. And he said to me, he explained who he is. He's a Russian professor of biochemistry who came on Aliyah, several years back. And I said to him, well, why are you sweeping the streets in Sfat when you could be teaching in a university? So he looks at me and he says, if you can ask that, you shouldn't be in Sfat. You should be leaving here. You got to love Sfat if you really want to be here. And he was right. What can I tell you? This is a beautiful place, but it isn't for everybody. It has a special kind of charm. And you do want to go there, but perhaps you don't want to live there. That's my gut. Because Sfat is all about mysticism, and mysticism isn't for everybody. And here you see the Talit factory, the cheese factory. In the second, you're going to see the candle factory. These are all aspects of Sfat. And it's all shown here except for one aspect, and that we're going to get to right now, which is, of course, Lag BaOmer. There's a wine factory there, the candle factory is coming up. So it gives a little idea of what Sfat is today. Now, there it is, that's the Sfat candle factory. Some of you may have seen that. Beautiful, nice, but I want to get to Lag BaOmer itself. Let's go to that right now. Lag BaOmer is connected to the city of Sfat for two reasons. The first is because of a wonderful story that takes place in and around Lag BaOmer during the War of Independence. The War of Independence rages in 1948. And there are many, many miracles and stories that can be told. One of the ones, remember I said you can believe all of them or you believe none of them. One of the stories told is about this mortar here on the left, this big, huge gun that is used during the War of Independence to fire on the Arabs who are trying to take over the entire city of Sfat and keep the Jews out. And legend has it that during a very rainy day in May, rain doesn't come in May in Israel often, which is just before Lag BaOmer, the Jews fired this weapon, made a lot of noise, didn't really kill anybody, but the rumor in the Arab quarter spread that the Jews, loud explosions and rain coming after it, that's acid rain. The Jews had the bomb. And they all left Sfat, and Sfat becomes completely Jewish. Is it true? I don't know. I wasn't there. But it's one of those legends that tour guides tell in Sfat, and you say, wow, what a strange, crazy place. And that's one. And, you can walk through Sfat and look at the graves in this graveyard. But for me, more importantly, the second connection is this. And this is a house in Sfat called the Abo House. You can see there, it's written on the top, Bet Abo. And you can see they're dancing with the Torah scroll. I'm going to play a short video of what goes on there on the morning of Lag BaOmer. Dancing, singing. You get the idea, I'm going to turn the volume down. This is where it all starts. Sfat and Lag BaOmer are connected because from this house, for 2 centuries, has begun the parade towards Lag BaOmer. This house is originally owned by a man called Shimon Abba, who died 200 years ago, but he buys the land that was where Rashbi is buried, and he builds the little building you saw there. So they're given the honor of starting the progression, and they take the Torah out, and they march down the mountain, and this is where the beginning of Lag BaOmer's celebrations will start. Let's get to those celebrations, because so much is going to be going on in Lag BaOmer. All over Israel, one of the customs is to build bonfires, because the bonfire symbolizes the light that the Rashbi brought to the world. It's also a lot of fun, but the idea behind it is it symbolizes that light that had not been revealed until that day of celebration. And you have bonfires, you also have little kids bringing wood, and people hoard wood to make sure nobody can touch their stash. all over the country to make those huge bonfires, and sadly people get injured every year. There's other things. You're going to see in a video in a second. This is at that gravesite. You have up until 2 years ago, there were, because of the pandemic, obviously, there were almost 400,000 people who came to the grave of the Rashbi on Lag BaOmer, which starts in Sfat, goes down across the mountain, and goes up to the grave, because this is where the light starts. A huge bonfire there is right next to the grave. That's part of the custom. Other customs that take place there, you have the idea that you should eat carobs. Anybody who's ever eaten carobs knows it's not the kind of thing that children beg for. Give me more carobs, Daddy, please. No, it's not very good. Why do you eat that? Because that's the food that the Rashbi and his son ate for 13 years outside the cave that I showed you before to keep themselves alive. Therefore, let's eat that. Crazy, weird customs. What else have we got? Yes, that is a bow and arrow. In Israel, one of the customs is, and it's always dangerous, is to play with bows and arrows. And you've got to be saying to yourself, what? And the reason here is because there's many reasons, by the way. This was a way the Jews would signal to the others that Romans are around by firing arrows and saying, oh, Romans are coming. Or perhaps they'd tell the Romans, we're going to go out and hunt right now. What they'd really do with their bows and arrows is put them next to and learn Torah, which is not allowed. Many reasons that this is what the custom is, but people do that. One of the customs that I particularly like is cutting children's hair. The little boys, when they reach 3, they have what's called an upshin. And all over the country, they do this. It's a nice little custom, and you teach the boys, what it is to love the Hebrew language, and you give them honey on the letters, and they lick that off, and they say the Shema, and you can see he's kind of confused, but they do this by the grave of the Rashbi. Again, to give this good luck. But perhaps more importantly, all over the country, everybody just parties because you're supposed to party. You're supposed to have fun, just enjoy Lag BaOmer. It's the idea you need to enjoy it. This is part of the customs of Lag BaOmer, at least the way I see it. I'm going to play a couple of videos here which show what goes on right there. And you know what? We've all been through a pretty tough year in COVID. And the thought of so many people on top of each other still gives me a little bit of the creeps. But watch what goes on at the grave here. Yeah, it is coincidence that they all chose the same outfit, I think. And by the way, for those who are wondering where the women, they have their own separate dancing in the other side. It's not without women, but they're obviously not together because people here are super religious. Here's another quick clip. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but what's it like inside. Notice this child over there who's about to have his hair cut. He looks totally bemused. But watch this little video. This is going on inside that scene. The singing there, to turn the volume down, what the singing is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It's awesome in some ways, it's a little frightening in other ways, but it's clearly giving people this connection. You know what? Some of us, and we turn the volume down completely here, some of us connect to this religious or spirituality, and some of us don't. But for those who do, you can clearly see this is a passion. This is something that drives them. This is something that makes them happy, fills them with love and with life. And you know what? Good for them. I may not really understand it, but I'm not going to condone it if that's what makes it happen for them. Good for you. Religion is all about connecting to something that makes you happy and not makes you want to hurt somebody, I think. So, I like looking at these pictures and saying, good for you guys. You have fun. That's a lot of what Lag BaOmer is about. And it's called, as I said, the Yom Hilulah, the day of rejoicing. You'd have thought a day that somebody really important dies is not going to be a day of rejoicing. No, it is, because that's when he gave all the secrets, and that's when he wants people to rejoice, not over his death, but over his life. Lag BaOmer, a very, very strange festival. And I do want to finish with showing you a few things, and I do want to leave time for questions. The first, I think my love of the land makes me show you the video from the top of Mount Meron and what you can see from there. That a friend of mine took this video. I want to show you because it's beautiful. The view from up there. I'll again turn the music down, which is just annoying. The view down in the valley below. You can see what I meant about fields that are able to be harvested, to be agriculturally used. There's the peak of Mount Meron, most of the year with snow on it. Not all the year, but most of the year. The forage down at the bottom, below Mount Meron. And you can see why people love to come here. It's just stunning, the green, the colors. It's beautiful. Down into the Galil HaTachton, the lower Galil, and you can come there and see the way the mountains each are shaded against each other. It's just, it's mesmerizing. And I love coming here and just looking around. It's one of my favorite places to go in the country is Mount Meron because of that. Not because of necessarily the spirituality, and that's what. If you have a pretty good camera, as this guy does, you can zoom in, it's not that far from Mount Meron itself. So as I said, a lot goes on here. But for me, it's perhaps more about just that time, that me time, that spiritual time. I don't need dancing and going crazy. I just need to enjoy the view. But that's just me. As I keep saying, to each his or her own. I do want to leave a few minutes for questions, but there's a few things I do want to do. I was going to play some videos on the beauty of the North, but I do want to play just two more things for you. And I want to kind of get a message across because, I mean, I've tried to describe the history of Lag BaOmer. I've tried to describe what the North is. And you're looking right now at views from all over the country that appear on my screen. And I think it really does boil down to, you know, Judaism or any religion actually is about a lot of things. And you can look at the good and look at the bad. And I tend to like looking at the good and saying, well, what can I glean from this? And what can we glean from Lag BaOmer? Well, it's definitely a strange festival, but it's also one that has beauty behind it. It has one where people will, you know, find that love and celebrate and enjoy and really connect through that joy, that joy in Judaism, if you will. And that's a wonderful side of it as well. It's a side which it speaks to a lot of people, perhaps not everybody, but it speaks to people. And as you travel through the land, one day, Mitzvah Hashem, you guys will come back and be able to travel normally. You do see this and you do say, well, you know, what does speak to me? And I do want to play you just two short videos and then I will leave time for questions. The first, I think it's such a powerful video. If you've seen it before, it's still worth seeing. It's by the incomparable late Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. It says it's so much better than me about this land. It's very short.
One very, very miserable winter, I said to Elaine, let's go somewhere where there's sunshine. And we had never been to Eilat before. So we said, let's go to Eilat. It's hot. And we went on one of these glass-bottom boats, and we were the only people on the boat, and we were talking. And the captain of the boat came up to us very excitedly and said, Atam me Anglia, are you from England? We said, yes, why do you ask? He said, I've just come from England. I've just been to a holiday in England. And we said, how do you like it? How did you like it? He said, wonderful. The buildings, so old. The grass, so green. The people, so polite. And then he looked around him, and in those days, Eilat was, you know, just a desert, I have to tell you. And he looked around at these bare, barren, brown hills. And an enormous smile came over his face. And he said, Aval zeh shelanu. But this is ours. Friends, there are other nations, other cultures, and other creeds, each beautiful in its own way. Aval zeh shelanu. But this is ours. Let us wear our identity with pride. Let us always be true to our faith and a blessing to others, regardless of their faith. And we will bring blessings to the world. Thank you very much indeed.
I really love the way that video is for so many reasons, and I really think it's connected to what we said about this land, about these strange customs that go on in this land at this exact time, because Zeh Shelanu, and when I say Shelanu, I don't just mean me, I mean Shelanu, all of us. And that's one message I wanted to leave you with, aside from the Lag BaOmer. And the last message I'm going to leave you with is another short video that I really enjoy playing. And this was a video recorded all the way back, maybe 3 months into the pandemic, when we'd really started to digest how much it hit us by an artist called Hanan Ben-Ari. And in this short song, Hanan Ben-Ari has 3 parts. The first part talks about how magnificent we thought we were. And the second part talks about how fast we fell. And all this is in the background of these pictures of empty Tel Aviv that you're going to see. And the final part, I'll let you hear for yourself.
כבר חשבנו, ניצחנו הכל, מגדלים בשמיים בנינו, בן אדם, מי צריך בן אדם? לא יבוא עוד מבול בימינו, לעולם, לעולם לא ניפול, תעזוב, נסתדר בעצמנו, חכמים, נכונים וצודקים, וכלום לא נמצא מעלינו, עד שבאת והדבקת ושיגעת והסגרת ובלבלת והבהלת מיד. איך החזרת את השפיות, געגועים לבני אדם, פתאום שורף את הבדידות, כבר לא תשים מפה לשם, כל הפארקים נעולים, חתונות כמעט בלי איש, כמעט איבדנו את עצמנו, כמעט הפסקנו להרגיש. עוד מעט זה הכל ייגמר, ואני מבקש אם אפשר, שבבוקר אחרי שתלכי, לא נהיה שוב אותו הדבר.
So I will end with that message. I will end with, after this is all over, we should be different people. We should be able to find the strength to be better people than we were before. And that message is perhaps a little disconnected from Lag BaOmer, but I think it's a good one to end with as well. And Rabbi did leave 5 minutes for questions on what I said. So, bavakasha.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Betsalel, and clearly much better at the timing than me. We're going to have an opportunity to ask some questions. So if you'd like to raise your hand physically or virtually, we can go around and call on people. Alvin.
Thank you, Rabbi. There's the other story that we've all heard about Lag BaOmer with the students of Rabbi Akiva, and they all kept dying with the plague, and that miraculously stopped on Lag BaOmer. You didn't mention that story at all. Where does that take place? Does that take place also in the north or elsewhere?
Okay, so it does take place. As you said, I think it appears in Sechet Shabbat, if I remember rightly. I could be wrong. But there's no other references to it aside from in the Talmud. So we don't actually know and why did the Romans stop killing? Was it a plague or did the Romans kill the students? But if it takes place, it's slightly before this because Rabbi Akiva will die in 135. And this all happens in the year 150, 160 and onwards. Right? The Rashbi is a student of Rabbi Akiva. He's a student after those 24,000 are killed. So if we're talking about chronologically, it's slightly before. But it is connected. If that legend, is connected also, it does stop on Lag BaOmer. So there is a connection. And you're right, I didn't relate to it, but I had to pick and choose what I was going to do. But yeah, there's a connection, but it's not exactly the same.
Robin Sue.
So sometimes light is associated with Hashem. It has the light. Is that at all related to the bonfire?
I mean, yes, Hashem. It's perhaps more from the point of view of, the fact that this was when the Rashbi enveloped the world in his light. I guess light or godly light, spiritual light, it's all the same thing, really. The idea is, there's other reasons for the bonfires as well. There's the reason that is given that they would light a bonfire in order to be able to learn in the dark. And so the Romans wouldn't know they were there, and if the Romans came, they'd put their books away and and do something else, the bows and arrows. But the idea is to bring light to the world. Correct.
Thank you,
Janet.
Yes, thank you for the wonderful lessons about Lag BaOmer. I have a question. What do your typical non-religious Jews do on Lag BaOmer? Is school canceled or people off from work? How do they celebrate?
Well, I mean, in a normal year, school generally does take place, but at night, it's bonfire night. Just going wild. The bonfire is the main part, sadly, because often people get hurt, as I said. And it's more just a party. It's just to have a party. There's no connection to Mount Meron. What I find interesting is, and I've been there more than once, is I know that the videos you can see are all these super religious people there that I showed you, but there's a lot more than just them there. They're the ones that push to get to the center. But all different walks of life, including many irreligious people, go there for the cultural connection of because they feel this traditional connection. They want to do their kids' haircut there. It's not just religious people at all. And of course, there's a whole section which is the women's side, which I didn't show you. It's, again, lack of time. But it's not, I wouldn't call it a religious festival. It's a strange, different kind of entity. There's a lot of aspects behind it.
Thank you.
Gail, go ahead.
I'm very upset about these large gatherings taking place. Will there be any restrictions to these Orthodox people?
Well, first of all, the videos I showed you from 2 years ago. Last year there was nothing there. It was banned. So I wouldn't get upset yet. And this year hasn't happened. And what they announced this year, because last year there was a lot of people wanting to go, and because it was bang in the center of the pandemic, we couldn't. And what they probably are going to do, it's in discussions right now, with the government that we don't have. And what it's probably going to be is they're going to allow a certain amount of people, but they're not going to allow as much of a party there. It's going to be not allowed to drink there because then it has to be completely masked. We don't really know, but it's not going to be as normal. What's going to be there in 4 or 5 days from now is not going to be what you saw on the screen, but it's not going to be empty either. I guess we'll wait and see.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Susie, we get all sorts of questions, Betsalel. Susie, go ahead.
I remember that Rosh Chodesh usually had some connection to Tzfat, that was where they made the announcement that Rosh Chodesh.
Right.
Do they still do anything to? No.
You're right in the fact that then when they announced the month, what they would do, this is a Second Temple custom, in order to spread the word from the temple where the moon was seen to the rest of the world, they would light the flames. And the fourth in the chain of flame lighting was that Tzfat was in Tzfat, it was on the peak of Tzfat because it was so high. But that has long since vanished because we have a permanent calendar. And that's where the Crusader castle I kind of showed you was built, on that exact point where the peak of the Mount of Tzfat. But there is a connection in that, but it's no longer a connection that we do today.
All right, and Bonnie has a question.
Well, this is taking it a little bit away from that, but when Gail brought up the crowds, in this country, we're having a tremendous amount of trouble getting a huge amount of people to be vaccinated. And now there's enough for everybody. In Israel, how did they manage to get it out there and have people more anxious to all get vaccinated? What are we doing wrong here?
I think there's two sides to that question. How did we get it out so quickly? Is because Israel's pretty good at war situations, getting ourselves mobiles. We've done enough of those. And this was kind of a war. We need to get out, we need to get them out and get them in. Let's do it. It's going to go. We can do it. Can you go ahead to get that together when it comes to that? That's one side. So we were very good at getting that super quickly, as well as the fact that, like him or loathe him, you got to give Benjamin Netanyahu credit for getting those vaccines in the country and persuading the people to give us those vaccines. But that's only one side. The other side is that in Israel, there isn't the level of anti-vaxxing that there is over by you. And by in the States, it's a big deal, anti-vaxxers, and much more than I do. In Israel, it's less that. It doesn't, it exists, but it isn't anywhere near the amount of, it's more people who would, let's say, ultra-Orthodox would say, well, God will protect me, I don't need it. But if the rabbi says go and get it, they're going to go and get it. Or the Arabs will say, oh, the Jews, and they do, by the way, they've all gone and got it. All ultra-Orthodox have gone and got it. Or the Arabs who may say, Jewish state, do I really want anything to do with this? But they're going to go and get it anyway because you want to be healthy. So what I've found, and I find it fascinating, is that the virus is kind of less than those differences between people. And Israel, we're all in it together. We all want to get it so we can go back to normal life. And we're getting there. We're getting back to normal life. But to deal specifically with anti-vaxxers, I don't this doesn't really exist here as that kind of an issue. I wish you good luck on that one.
Thanks.
Any last questions? Oh, Ruth, go ahead. If you could unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself?
Is that better?
Great.
What is the literal translation of Lag Bomer?
Lag is the Hebrew words Lamed and Gimel, which is 33. It's the number 33 if you take the letter representation of the numbers. Lamed is 30, Gimel is 3. This is the 33rd day of the Omer, the counting between Pesach and Shavuot. So it's just the 33rd day, day number 33 of the Omer. And
From one holiday to the next? Is that from one holiday to the next? Is that, can you hear me? I froze.
You froze a little bit. Can you say that again, please?
From one holiday, Passover, to the next holiday in 33 days. Is that it?
Well, no, there's 49 days of the Omer between Pesach and Shavuot. That's stated in the Torah. You should count 7 lots of 7 weeks. And Lag BaOmer is the 33rd day out of the 49 total. So,
thank you.
Welcome.
It went very quick, your talk. It was excellent.
Ta-da.
All right. Anyone else? Well, I want to thank you so much, Betsalel. I agree with Ruth, it was excellent. Thank you
That's
for joining
wonderful.
us and for teaching us so much about Lag BaOmer and helping us tour the north and learn a bit about the mystics as well. So thank you so much. I hope everyone enjoyed, and it's certainly great to see everyone. And we will be back together for our next installment next Tuesday. We're going to be joined with our good friend and someone Betsalel knows well, Elon Block, who's going to lead a session for us on Jerusalem next Tuesday, same time, same channel.
Place.
So good to see
Thank you
everyone.
so much. It was wonderful.
And thank you all.
Wonderful.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Stay
program.
well.
you.
Thank you.
Most
Thank
enjoyable.
you.
Thanks.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.